to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio and online.
And it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, Ella Whelan and Kevin Schofield. And what are we starting with first? Kevin, or is you? Hello. Gosh, the anniversary of Grenfell.
Yeah, 5 years.
5?
I can't believe it.
And even more incredibly, in those 5 years, no one has been charged, no one's been convicted. The police have been investigating a range of offences: corporate manslaughter, gross negligence. Public inquiry was announced the day after it happened by Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at the time. That's been going on, hundreds of hours worth of testimony, millions of documents, and still nothing.
Well, I mean, the headline there in the Telegraph is, "We know who the guilty are, but they remain free."
Yep, and that is, it's a great piece actually, looking into speaking to victims' families who are just looking for answers, for justice, and as I say, 5 years on, still no nearer to find it.
What do we make of the fact, I know it's controversial, but the fact that it's still standing?
Well, there was a debate that was happening between people who were both relatives of those who tragically lost their life and former residents, of whether or not it should just be leveled to the ground and moved and forgotten about, as in people have some kind of grieving process which they can move on, or whether it should stand as a testament to remind people of what happened. And in the context of what Kevin's saying, that it still hasn't been resolved 5 years later, I mean, even some of the people who were living in Grenfell, who then survived, were put up in hotel accommodation weren't given houses, weren't given permanent housing for far too long. I mean, months and months, and some even years afterwards. And so then, in that context, moving on from it becomes impossible if you can't put your finger on who's to blame. I mean, the complicated factor is that there was a number of things that went wrong, from the implementing of the cladding to the failure within the council, and there was lots of different moving parts, but there has been a huge amount of kind of passing the buck and dishonesty and
but there were very grand and glorious announcements at the time that there would be the inquiry, that things would get done, this must never happen again, and all the rest of it, and it seems to have gone quiet. In a way, the fact that the building is still there stands as testament to the fact that we haven't got enough done.
Yeah, you see that time and again with other tragedies, that in the immediate aftermath, politically, there's huge pressure on the government, so they announce an inquiry, that kicks it into the long grass. The news agenda moves on, other things happen that people focus on, and as I say, lo and behold, here we are 5 years on, and nothing has happened. And by their very nature, these inquiries do take an awful long time, so it's probably going to be years, by which time, families, members will have died, that sort of memory will just fade.
Just dissipates.
Absolutely, and there's less political pressure on the government. We've got a different Prime Minister. Who knows who the Prime Minister will be by the time the inquiry reports, and yeah, if there's less pressure on the politicians, then they're not going to do anything about it. It's tragic.
For people watching it and listening at the moment who don't live around London, the building is still there. It's covered in scaffolding, and
it has a message.
With a big green heart on it. But it's still there. I wonder why. I was imagining it would be taken down floor by floor or something.
And replaced like the Twin Towers, replaced
like a memorial sort of thing. Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah.
Look, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. So, Ella, can we have a look at food? This is in the eye this morning. We need to eat like a king, a prince and a pauper.
Well, it's two conflicting versions from two professors who are arguing for two different kinds of diets. And Professor Foster, who has got the headline, suggests that the best way to lose weight and to eat healthily is to pile it in at breakfast, and then before you go to bed eat very little, because he says that the evidence shows that we store fat later on in the day. But then there's somebody else, Tim Spector, who's Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at King's College London, is actually suggesting that the best way to do it is to fast, so you leave off your big breakfast until maybe 11 or 12. It's the thing that both of them have in common is suggesting that actually the way in which we eat in the modern world, lots of people eat late at night because of work or things like that, isn't actually conducive to our natural body clock, and that as much as you can, you should be loading it up in the early hours because that's when you're burning the fat and using the calories. I mean, that's not practical for most people, but I think, you know, we all know that when we reach for the toast at 11 o'clock at night, it's probably not going to do us any good.
I never want breakfast in the morning. I'm never hungry in the morning.
Oh, it's my favourite meal of the day.
But Tim Spector, the guy at King's College, says that the most important thing, at whatever time of day it is to have a very long period of fast during the day. So if you, for instance, eat supper and then go to bed and you don't eat your breakfast till 11-ish, you've had a very long period where you're not eating at all. And he says that's the most important thing.
Right. You're absolutely starving when you wake up in the morning.
Well, sometimes I only eat once a day, sometimes. But it doesn't seem to make any difference to me.
Well, they don't feed us here, and so you have to feed yourself about 11 o'clock on your way home or something. So I go through a very long period, actually, of fast. Yeah. So that's probably...
We're being healthy. Can we have a look, Kevin, at the FT? Because this MP who's called, was it Blackpool and Birmingham, she said were god-awful.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a great story. This is Heather Wheeler, who's a Cabinet Office Minister, was at an event not covered very much other than by a trade journalist. And at the beginning of her speech, to sort of break the ice, she says, I was just at a conference in Blackpool or Birmingham, somewhere god-awful. And so this, yeah, exactly.
She said this in her speech.
Well, it's a preamble. It wasn't written down, obviously. I thought it was written down. It'd be sack your speechwriter if you think that's a good thing for the minister to say. But anyway, so this trade journalist tweets it, and obviously straight away he gets a phone call from the Cabinet Office. You know, she was just making a joke. Probably best not to report on this. It's not really much of a story, but the FT have picked it up. We followed up at the HuffPost as well, and yeah, I mean, she's had to apologise. What a gaffe, especially.
Yeah, but she said, hasn't she? Oh yes, I didn't believe what I said.
Well, that I mean, it's the thick of it.
That's not a good thing for a Tory MP to say anyway.
Well, especially when the whole thing about Boris Johnson's government is levelling up, helping the North, and people are saying, well, the Labour are saying obviously the mask has slipped. This is what the Tories really think of the North. I mean, if you're being kind to her, you say it's an ill-judged joke. But I think it betrays maybe an attitude.
They laid that Emily Thornberry stage, didn't they?
Previously in the programme, when I was talking about all the holidays, one of the things the Express reported was that Blackpool was the most popular destination for people. Still. So she really doesn't know what she's talking about.
Insult Blackpool.
And also, how can you confuse Birmingham with Blackpool? I mean, they're very different.
Somewhere beginning to be.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, Blackpool needs a lot of investment, but there's a lot. I had a holiday up there at the end of last year. It was a weekend away. It was fantastic. A lot of fun. Look, we're out of time. Good to see you both this morning. Ella, Kevin, thank you.
Happy Saturday.
Thank you.